G'day guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 117, and of course we have a lot to talk about today. A lot of drama around the AFL space regarding some rumours on trades and the reasoning behind it, the Wangeneen-Milera stuff we'll get to towards the end of the episode. We have some great news for the Bulldogs and Luke Beveridge, and I also want to take a look at the Max Gawn incident that happened on the Monday afternoon clash on the Big Freeze, and of course much more. So let's not waste any more of your time guys, let's roll the intro and get straight into it. Welcome to the Boundary Riders podcast, your one-stop shop for all your AFL content needs.
He looks at his options, and Jack Ginnivan says, boys, you brought me to the club to do justice!
But this guy has Flog written all over him.
From a tap down, Reed sprints away from Petrarca, leaves him in his wake, takes a second bounce, takes a third. The sheer arrogance of Harley Reid. Finish the job, young man!
So let's get into the footy news from the week that was. So guys, as you can tell, my brother isn't here today. Another day of work, unfortunately for him. I think he just wanted to avoid us because basically, I don't know if it's a trend, but he's not here. They had Port Adelaide won, so maybe if they can win this week, well, do they have the bot? No, they win. They play this week. If they can win again, well, maybe he won't be back for the rest of the year. But I'm sure he'll be back in the next week or so. He has given me his bets, so the betting segment will go ahead as per usual. But I'll be carrying the episode today, as I've done many times before. Carried him in family events. I'll carry him through the podcast today as well. So let's get into the first story that I want to take a look at. Luke Beveridge has re-signed with the Western Bulldogs. Great news for him. He is officially signed on a 2-year deal. So, of course, he was coaching at this stage of the season, not knowing if he was going to continue on as the head coach of the Dogs. However, he has re-signed now after a pretty decent start from them. Pretty poor loss last week against Hawthorn, but I think that's the right decision. I think that at the moment he seems like he's doing a good job. I know there's been some question marks over him over the years, but seems like the Doggies are going okay at the moment, and I think that I know they had a bit of a slip up last week against the Hawks, but I think that they will be right up there as long as they can get some wins. And they do need, I think they should be finishing around that top 4 mark, so they need to start winning some games because at the moment they're still outside the top 8, which is quite surprising that we've got them so high up considering that they aren't in the 8 at the moment, and a lot of the 8 is starting to be set. So they're going to have to start getting some wins in the next, 2 months or so, or else they may miss out, which would be a dreadful, end of the year considering how positive it's been at the start. Now, sticking on the Dogs, it does seem that Sam Darcy is a chance to return this week. Of course, 2 months ago? There was a lot of speculation with an injury in a game that it was an ACL. It wasn't, luckily for him, but so he was out for the last 2 months or so, but now it seems like he could return this week, which would be great for the Dogs up against St Kilda this week. We'll get to that a little bit later, but great signs for the Dogs. In other good news on Essendon's point of view, Zach Reid has signed a new contract extension with the Bombers to stay until 2028. It's really good for the Dons. And I want to get to the Kozi Pickett one a little bit more in depth in a moment. So we'll get through these other little topics quickly. The Giants are pretty hopeful that Toby Green should overcome a corky that he saw against Port Adelaide on the weekend, going in against the Lions, while star midfielder and Finn Callaghan is a chance to return for the Giants this week against the Lions as well. Those would be massive ins. Well, that would be a massive in Callaghan for them because they were smashed in the midfield last week. So that would be good for the Giants. And on Brisbane's point of view, same game, Brendan Starskovic could be making his return after 3 months out through concussion protocols and having, I think it was 3 concussions in the space of 8 months of footy. So they've left him out for quite a while. However, he looks like he may return this week. But there is some concern regarding Oscar McInerney. He's been out for the past 3 or 4 weeks, and they've always said he's been some sort of injury like soreness. Chris Fagan has said in passing, basically, that it is some sort of back concern. However, they haven't really elaborated on that at this stage. So maybe keep your eye on that one. I'd be a bit surprised if he joins back into the team this week. Darcy Ford has done okay, but Oscar McInerney is a bit of a class above, let's be honest. But let's talk about Kozi Pickett. So Pickett's had a very good start to this year, I would say, probably in All-Australian form at the moment. Obviously, before that, though, throughout last year's trade period going into the start of this year, there's been a lot of rumours regarding him wanting to return home to WA. He is still contracted for 3 more years at the Demons. However, it does seem that Melbourne are trying to get him to stay long term. So at the moment he is 24 years of age, but they are seeking the Demons to give him a 7-year contract extension. So this would take him to 2034. This would be the longest serving contract in the AFL, I believe, if this was to go through. Pickett already signed 2 more seasons, is still signed for 2 more seasons till 2027, but the new deal has been presented is an absolute game changer, and the decision is expected soon on his willingness to lock in long term with the Demons. It does show that the Demons really want to hold him strong, but I think this is a really, really dangerous idea, if I'm being honest. There's been 2 years now where Kozi Pickett has been linked to returning home to WA, and that's when the Demons have done poorly. Now, granted, they've had they had a very bad start to the year, but, since basically round 6, they've been very good, and he has been very good as well. I think this is I would be incredibly cautious if I were Melbourne to be throwing a 10-year deal basically to Kozi Pickett, because what's to say that in 5 years' time or 4 years' time that he doesn't want to return home and then you've just wasted a contract? I don't think they should be doing this, to be honest with you. I think that we've seen the Oliver situation and Christian Petrarca. I think Melbourne should not be doing this. I understand they want to keep Kozi Pickett, but he's there for 2 more years. I would wait until that 2-year contract is getting up and then offer him this contract to see how he is, or offer him a 5-year deal. To offer him a 7-year contract extension now, which would, it's supposed to finish at 2034, which is 9 years away. This seems incredibly desperate to throw a contract to Kozi Pickett, who has always been linked to going back to WA. If I'm Kozi Pickett, I'm just waiting until the end of the year, to be honest. Melbourne have already said that they would keep him to his contract. They said that to him last year when he was potentially looking for a trade back to WA. But if I'm Melbourne, I don't know why they're doing this. This is look, if they get him and he stays there for all that time, great. It would be great. A great decision, great work from their team management side of things. But there's so many variables here, and he has been, like I said, he's been linked to going back to WA almost for the last 2 years at least, and there's still rumours regarding him wanting to go back now. Now, they have softened a little bit. It does seem that he is getting around to staying at the Demons for a few more years, but to offer him this contract, it seems incredibly desperate. And if I'm Kozi right now, I am sitting there laughing, because this club wants me, Fremantle want me. He basically can sit back, relax, and ask for whatever money he wants, because this is just a sign of how desperate Melbourne are to keep him. But anyway, we'll see what happens. I really don't think this is a good idea from Melbourne's point of view. I'm not exactly on the Kane Corns train of saying that all long contracts are really bad ideas, but I think this one is incredibly dangerous for the Demons when we've seen previous players like Clayton Oliver and Christian Petrarca's contracts being, really bad, like when we were looking at it last year in the trade period. Another story that was brewing a little bit earlier I think it was like Thursday or Friday last week, was according to Mitch Cleary, it's an exclusive that AFL boss Andrew Dillon drove to the home of Bailey Smith in a secret fireside meeting alongside Chris Scott, Andrew Mackey and Steve Hocking on Thursday. So this was in regards to his antics on the field in more recent times, and basically telling him to cool it down. This is the most stupidest thing that Andrew Dillon could do. What is he doing? I mean, we want to see personality in the game. I have been a huge talk about that for a very long time. If you guys watch the podcast, you would know. What is he doing? He is one of the biggest draw cards to the game right now. Everyone wants to know, what is Bailey Smith doing? We saw how much hype he brought to that game a couple of weeks ago with Geelong versus the Bulldogs. And they're trying to tell him to cool it down. What are you doing? Are you stupid? Do you not see the advertising he is bringing to the game right now? To the younger audience, to new watchers, the love, the hate, the excitement, all the questions regarding Bailey Smith. This is a guy that you should be plastering all over your advertisements for the game right now. And you're telling me you're going to try and tell him to cool it? Are you kidding? I absolutely hate the idea of AFL, Andrew Dillon, becoming trying to stop people from being the personalities of the game. Because I think that we're finally getting them back, and as soon as we get some personality-driven players, we've seen Jack Ginnivan, we shut him down. We get Bailey Smith, we shut him down. This is ridiculous. We need to stop doing this, because this is growing the game to a new audience of, you know, younger supporters. And this is, I mean, look, I know a lot of people don't really, you know, really put a lot of merit into going internationally, but this is the way they would get it into an international audience as well, is to growing these, you know, two different audiences over the world, is to get excitement from these sorts of players. Like, you think of, and I don't really into the NBA, but you see a lot of American sports like the NFL, the NBA, the way they celebrate, the way they are. It builds hype around those sort of contests. And I know the American sports are different to Australian sports, and the cultures are different, and yada, yada, yada. But the game is it's entertainment. They need to grow, and to try and lock down his personality or whatever they're going to say, like, oh, you know, we just want him to cool it, keep it calm. You know, he can still be himself. No, you don't. You want him to shut him down. You want him to not be himself. And this is so stupid of Andrew Dillon to do. I'm trying to make a video regarding the Tasmania stuff, so that's going to be in the works, hopefully in the next couple of months, hopefully. But we've obviously seen recently, I think it was Greg Swan join the AFL. If I'm him and I'm seeing what Andrew Dillon's doing, I don't know what... I mean, he's been with Brisbane for a long time. We've seen a couple of personality-driven players up there. Like, you see Kyle Lohmann, Charlie Cameron for a long period as well. Dane Zorko, which is, I mean, a little bit different, but also, you know, personality is there. If I'm Greg Swan, I'd be turning around and saying to him, hey, you want to grow this game to a, you know, new audience and keep this game growing, you know, because the game is growing very well. You want to keep it growing more. Keep these personalities in the game. Every single time we see every single time a game finishes at Geelong, what happens? The first thing that happens is the media, the boundary rider on the ground is immediately going to Bailey Smith after a Geelong win, asking him how he's going, how he thought the game went. They're not going to many other people. They're going to Bailey Smith because he's the entertainment factor, and they're going to try and shut him down. Of all people, I can't believe how stupid this was. And look, maybe they just had a chat with him and just told him, hey, Bailey, keep it up. I doubt that highly. Why would you do that? But anyway, I just think this is incredibly dumb. And I think that he was close to getting the Flog of the Week this week, but he did get a nomination, I think, earlier in the year. So he didn't get it this week. But stupid decision from Andrew Dillon to try and shut down someone's personality, especially someone who's putting butts in seats every week. The Geelong games are getting filled out with crowds, and Bailey Smith will be a major reason for that. Now, I quickly wanted to talk about the Nick Daicos matchup up against Ed Langdon, Monday. So I wanted to talk about that because there's been a lot of contention regarding the tag. Lee Matthews came out and said that the umpires failed in the early minutes of the King's birthday clash, not giving Nick Daicos free kicks sooner on the hard tag from Ed Langdon, while Melbourne coach Simon Goodwin said he hopes that all AFL players are umpired as strictly as Langdon was after halftime, saying it was pretty clear the adjustment that was made on the Demons' actions throughout the contest. And as we saw throughout the commentary, Lee Montagna was one person saying that it was a very old school tag, trying to get under his skin, and I think it worked to an extent. Now, we saw in the last quarter when Nick Daicos got away from the tag, or, you know, he responded from it. And I think that it is absolutely ridiculous that we are getting so upset about Nick Daicos getting tagged. I don't get why so many supporters are upset that Nick Daicos is getting tagged. I think it should be the ultimate... I understand that, like, it's taking out your best player and it's, you know, hampering your team to an extent, but he also got 4 free kicks. And there were a couple of free kicks in that game that he got, by the way, that were fucking contentious, to say the least. Overall, bottom line, I think it was a very contentious game for umpiring. There are a lot of decisions going wrong. And I think I just hate the idea of saying, no, you can't tag Nick Daicos. It's like, yes, you can, and you should be allowed to. And for people who say, oh, you know, he was getting pushed a lot in that, well, then that's on the umpires to pay the free kick. A lot of people get angry about the fact that teams are doing it. And it's like, bro, if you're going to stop the best player of one of the best players in the competition, sometimes you have to put extra work into him. And I think Ed Langdon did a good job yesterday. And I think tagging in the AFL is starting to come back. And I think it is a good idea to shut down the best players. And I don't get why a lot of other teams, like not every team does it, or most teams don't do it. I think that Bailey Smith has been let go a lot this year on the fact that his burst of speed, you can't catch him, all that sort of stuff. I don't get why teams aren't doing it, because I think there's a lot of games where Bailey Smith has dragged his team over the line this year for the Cats, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does return this week. I think it's about 50-50. I think he'd be back, but if he doesn't get tagged this week up against Essendon, they're gonna have a field day, the Cats. And more teams need to start tagging these best players in the game to take them out of it. And if there is free kicks to be paid, then, umpires need to be aware of that. But I also think that, basically pointing out the fact of like, no, we can't tag Nick Daicos. He's a protected species. He's a grown man. He can fucking deal with it himself. He's not a fucking child. I absolutely hate that. I don't know if it's just it's not really a Collingwood thing. It's an AFL thing when a player gets tagged on your team and people are like, oh, he got treated badly and all that sort of bullshit. It's like, no, he just got some attention that he doesn't usually get, and it's a bit different. And I mean, I didn't see anything too bad in that game that like I thought that it was like over the top from Ed Langdon, to be honest. I thought it was a very good tagging job from him. And then in the last quarter, Nick Daicos responded. I thought it was just good football. It was good tactics from both coaches. And eventually, I mean, at the end of the day, Collingwood won the game. So I just thought it was ridiculous, the amount of outrage we saw over this. But that wasn't even the most outrage from this game because of the Max Gawn situation. So I'm sure everyone's seen the clip by now. It's been circulating all over the internet regarding Max Gawn after the game. Well, sorry. For 40 seconds ago, he takes a relieving mark, and then his kick into the middle of the defensive 50 was dreadful. He moved on too quickly, and he made a huge mistake, turned over the ball, and the game was done. So after that occurred, though, Stephen May, his teammate, went up to him and said something. And then Max Gawn pushed him away and looked pretty agitated by what Stephen May had to say. Now, it has been revealed, thanks to the great man, Tom Morris, who, would take this with a grain of salt, if anything. But he has said that May effectively asked Gawn why he rushed the kick, given there was more than 30 seconds remaining in the game. Morris also revealed that Gawn was left frustrated for 3 reasons. One was the fact that he got called to play on by the umpire. 2, because he thought that 2 Collingwood players encroached on the mark and thought it was 50-metre penalty. And 3, Gawn was just simply annoyed by his own mistake. Now, I think overall it was just a wrong timing sort of thing. It shouldn't have Stephen May should have been like, okay, he's the captain of this club. Let's just leave him alone. He makes mistakes, once every 10 years of his career? I don't think Stephen May should be really having a go at him. So, wrong timing, shouldn't have been done. Stupid mistake. But the amount of media over this little thing that happened is so outrageous. It is laughable, if I'm being honest. This would happen, maybe not this to an extent, but there would be so many times that this sort of stuff happens in a game when we've seen it, when players turn around when a teammate makes a mistake and absolutely blast them and roast them. And we don't get this much speculation, but because it's Melbourne, and I'm not a Melbourne fan, I'm a Swans fan, you can see it in the back corner, it just is like, it has to be a news story. And it's like, bro, I'm tired of the Melbourne stories at this point. Imagine how their supporters feel. I don't want to fucking hear it. I saw that happen and I was like, oh, what the fuck is Stephen May doing, you idiot? Just leave him alone. He's your best player, you moron. And then all of a sudden this has become into 3 different stories where Nick Riewoldt saying one thing on the stupid agenda setters, which we'll get to in a moment because one of their co-hosts is getting the Flog of the Week award because so many people apparently wanted it this week that we've had to pick one, but I think 3 or 4 could have been awarded with it this moment. But it's just ridiculous how much this became such a huge story over, Max Gawn just being frustrated with, Stephen May, a teammate of his, saying something, which, in the heat of the moment, Stephen May shouldn't have done that, obviously. I think he would have regret that. And again, Max Gawn has to come out and protect his club. The amount of times he has to protect this Melbourne Football Club, if they don't build a statue in front of the MCG just for him at the end of his career, I don't think... If I'm Simon Goodwin, I am buying 10 bags of cement and building my own shrine to Max Gawn when he retires, because he has done so much for that fucking club. I mean, there must be something in his contract for the amount of times that he has had to, chuck some sort of like extinguish the flames that are the problems at the Melbourne Football Club. He has done so much for them, and he just has to continue to come out and fucking fix up their fuck-ups. So, I mean, I feel so sorry for Max Gawn, but fucking hell. There was absolutely nothing in it, and the media speculation regarding this is absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe it was pushed to this extent. And I thought it was hilarious in the 7 commentary when I think it was after the game when it happened. BT and Daisy Thomas were talking about it. And Daisy Thomas even said, I hope this doesn't blow up into a huge thing. This would happen all the time. And BT would be like, oh, we'll definitely bring it up on our show, the Agenda Centers or whatever. And then immediately on that show, they blow it out of proportion. It was so funny. Typical, but funny. So let's move on from that. Now, before we move into a couple of our regular segments of the episode, I wanted to take a quick look at the Brownlow medal ladder predictor at this moment and see who's in front. Because I think around this point of the year, we're about 13, 14 rounds into it. We're starting to get a good idea about what players are going to be up there when the Brownlow will be done at the end of the season. Now, this is according to the AFL website. They have said at the moment that Jordan Dawson is at 2 votes outright in front on 18, in front of Hugh McCluggage and Bailey Smith on 16, Noah Anderson, Max Gawn, Connor Rosie at 15, and then Daicos, Green is Tom Green, and Zach Merritt all on 14 votes. So, pretty tight race at this stage. I tend to agree with with Jordan Dawson being up the top. A little bit surprising Nick Daicos is a little bit lower. He's 4 votes behind, but he has been tagged in a couple of games this year, and Sidebottom's actually probably taken a few votes from him, if I'm being honest. Bailey Smith being on 16, that is, not surprising. He's had a really good year, but, I don't think anyone could have imagined how good a season he would have had in his first year at the Cats, so he's doing really well. But Hugh McCluggage is having a really underrated season, in my opinion. He's second on the list right now. He's probably up there. He's definitely got a few votes in the Boundary Riders medal, of course. If you watch the review on the main channel, you would know. I'm not going to reveal the leaderboard for that, by the way, until the end of the season when we do the live stream, because I just think it's more fun that way. But Hugh McCluggage has definitely polled a lot of votes so far to this point of the year. Now, I wanted to quickly mention a couple of players which I think could maybe make a big rise or could be like a smoky for a Brownlow at the moment. Now, on the Crows' point of view, they haven't necessarily relied on Dawson over the last month or so, and his votes have definitely dried up. Now, I think... And I don't know if he's going to be able to hold on to the lead, because there's been a lot of Crows players over the last month or so when they've been winning that he has not actually got votes. So at the moment, he's in front, according to the predictor anyway. I think he will be very high up there. I think there'll be a lot of games throughout the rest of the year where they win at home and he'll get votes. But there's a lot of players coming around him that are probably stealing some from him at the moment. You look at Ben Keys, who's doing really well lately. A couple of the defenders are probably taking some votes from him as well. And, a couple of the forwards like Josh Rochelle, he's probably done some really good performances, Riley Thilthorpe. There's a lot of players like taking those 1 and 2 votes where Jordan Dawson hasn't had like the 3 vote absolutely outstanding game. But he may have got 1 or 2, but are probably being taken away from like those players at the Crows that are like in really hot form at the moment. So Jordan Dawson, I think is definitely the favourite. I think at the moment he's in outstanding form, and I think that he deserves to be, as highest on the predictor. But I don't know if you're able to hold it. I personally think that the 2 sneaky chances right now are Max Gawn and Noah Anderson. Now I think Anderson, because of a few weeks ago we actually saw the ratings on who has the easiest and who has the hardest fixtures going into the rest of the season. The Gold Coast have the 3rd easiest. And I think Noah Anderson can make a really big charge towards the end of the year. He's only, at the moment on the predictor, he's only 3 votes behind Jordan Dawson. And I think that Anderson, maybe Rao would probably be a little bit of an annoyance for him on the Brownlow night, because Rao may take some votes from him. However, I do think that Noah Anderson is a sneaky chance. And the reason why I say Max Gawn is because I think he gets a lot of 1-vote games when his team loses. And when they win, he's usually a part of the votes. I think we've seen already this year that he's on 15 votes right now, and his team had a very poor start. But I think he's definitely got some votes coming through there. He could get some sneaky 1s and 2s, which could definitely push them up. And they're in pretty decent form. So I think that Max Gawn right now is a sneaky for me. However, if I'm being honest, I think that Bailey Smith should have this in the bag, in my opinion. As long as he plays enough games, he should get it. The Cats have the easiest run home. A lot of games down in Geelong where Bailey Smith doesn't mind. I think this is Bailey Smith's Brownlow to lose, if I'm being honest. I'll be interested to see in the next couple of weeks if teams start to tag Bailey Smith and see if he can handle it. But at the moment, I think it's his to lose. I think that they've got such a good run home, and I just don't see any other players really taking votes from him, unless it's Jeremy Cameron having a 6-goal performance. But other than that, I really can't see anyone else doing it. We saw Max Holmes have a brilliant performance last week in the game when he was out. But Max Holmes, I don't think is doing that every week. And I think there's no other player that's going to be able to... No one has the capability to get, consistent votes of Geelong if it's not Bailey Smith. So I think that it is to lose at the moment. That's probably my thoughts at this stage. Sneakies are Gawn and Anderson. At the moment, Jordan Dawson, I understand, is the favourite. And my almost certainty at the moment would be Bailey Smith. I think that he is, with a great run home, he doesn't really have a lot of players that are going to take votes from him unless it's going to be an outstanding performance from Jeremy Cameron or maybe a forward or something like that. I think it's his to lose at the moment. But with that being said, guys, let's get to the preview to round 14, of course. Now, if you've seen the main channel video, you've seen this already. But nonetheless, let's get to it for right now. The tips and all that for the preview to round 14. A couple of big games coming up this round. So let's break down the 4 biggest games coming over the weekend. And first of all, we're going to be starting with the Friday night contest down in Tasmania. Hawthorn up against the Crows. A big matchup, of course, both of these teams coming off big wins last week. Hawthorn coming off a great response against the Dogs, while the Crows coming off a galvanising win against the Lions. I think this game could be one of the games of the round, if I'm being honest. Hawthorn returning to form last week, while the Crows, like I said, coming off a great win. Now, what I think adds a little bit more mystery to this game is because of the fact that it's down in Tassie. Friday night, expecting very cool conditions down there, and I think this does play into the Hawks' favour. However, the Crows last week on their win against the Lions was in very tough conditions, so definitely not beyond them, in my opinion. Now, I will be interested to see what Hawthorn do with the Dawson matchup. Hasn't been really needed as much as he was earlier in the season over the past couple of weeks. However, I think this game is built for a Jordan Dawson breakout performance. So I think that Newcombe will most likely go head-to-head with him at clearance. But if he drifts forward, I really don't know what Hawthorn are going to do, because I think a lot of the defenders of Hawthorn are just going to have their hands full with the other Adelaide Crows forwards. We've seen Ben Keys in career best form at the moment, and then you've got Phil Thorpe, Walker, Fogarty up there. Rankin goes through there at times. It's going to be really tough for the Hawthorn defence to then have to deal with Jordan Dawson drifting up there as well. Now, I think there is a way that the Crows can get this game won with their small forwards, as long as their tools bring it to ground in the tough conditions. I mean, Friday night in Tasmania, it's not going to be warm conditions for them. So if the ball gets bombed long, all they have to do is bring the ball to ground, get their dangerous smalls to get to work. But on the Hawthorn point of view, I think their forward mix at the moment can get it done. And we also have to talk about the probably career best form at the moment of Jack Ginnivan. Since his return, he's been one of the best players in the game as that half forward / small forward role. He has been so instrumental in Hawthorn's win last week against the Dogs. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if Adelaide put a little bit of work into him, try and get him off his game. I think this is a 50-50 game, if I'm being honest. So the only way I can split these two teams is on the location. So I'm going to be picking Hawthorn on the fact that it's down in Tasmania. They have a very good record down there. And I think the Crows got a little bit lucky last week against the Brisbane Lions. Obviously, with the Lions kicking 8 behinds in a row in that final quarter, really should have won that game. So the Crows got a little bit lucky. However, maybe that galvanises them. Maybe that makes them a lot better, a lot tougher. And this would be a great win for the Crows if they can win this one. That will lock them in that top 4 spot for quite a while. However, my brother is actually going to be tipping the Crows. He has said that the Crows beat the Hawks last time down there in Tasmania, and he thinks that the Hawks responded last week. He wants to see a lot more and do it again before he starts trusting them a lot more. He also points out that the Crows forwards will be too strong for the Hawthorn defence, which it's pretty hard to argue with at the moment. The Crows forward line is so potent, so we'll have to wait and see if Hawthorn's defence can stand up to that. Next game, though, I want to take a look at is the Saturday afternoon game between the Lions and the Giants. Brisbane coming off a tough loss against the Crows last week, like we previously mentioned, after dropping a game that they really should have won. They kicked themselves out of that game. After the match, we saw Chris Fagan in the press conference that not really too impressed by that, so I would expect the response from the Lion this week. But same could be said for GWS. They were incredibly disappointing against Port Adelaide in Canberra. They only recorded 7 goals, and they were really beaten around the footy by the power mids, and the Giants have been so inconsistent this year. We have seen some really big performances from them against the likes of Geelong down in the Cattery and Carlton, but then they've been found out against teams like the Sydney Swans, the Power, and even the Tigers, even though they just won that game. So I do expect a response from both teams, especially the Giants. So if they can do that, maybe they can cause an upset, but I think the Lions simply just win this game. If the Lions won last week, I think they'd be up there, probably equal with the Pies on premiership favouritism at the moment. I have so much faith in the Brisbane Lions. Even though they haven't really found that Danaher answer at this stage, I think they've still been really, really good to win games majority of the season where they haven't looked like winning. So last week was a little bit of a mulligan in my opinion. So I really trust the Lions. I think they're going to be really good this week up in Brisbane. Tough game at Adelaide Oval was always going to be tough for them to win. So I see Brisbane getting a response. Now my brother has also said the same. He said the Lions have won 6 of their past 8 games against the Giants. Both teams have been pretty inconsistent, but he's seen more from the Lions than the Giants in the past month or so. And bringing it to the Gabba, I think the Lions should win. Next up though, big game of course, Essendon v Geelong. So Geelong coming off a grinding win against the Gold Coast in really tough conditions, while the Dons coming off a tough loss against the Blues. Now Essendon really need to fix up their slow starts. In the last 2 weeks, they've conceded 12 goals in the first quarters. So they have to fix that up or else they're not going to have any chance in this game. And I really think that's a big reason why they've been out of those contests, because they've been close against Brisbane and the Blues, but being behind by 6 goals puts you in a real tough position to win games. So I think that's where Essendon need to fix it up. Now, if Bailey Smith does return, Essendon simply just have to put work into him. I'm unsure as to why teams haven't been doing it this season, because I think he's probably the best player in the competition right now. Now, I don't know what answer that is for the Bombers. Sam Durham will likely be suspended. I'm recording this on Monday afternoon before they actually release the tribunal or match review officer responses to those games. But I'm assuming he's going to probably be out. So Sam Durham, probably not the option. I think he's probably too slow for him as well with that burst that Bailey Smith always has. I really don't know what they're going to do, the Bombers, but they have to find an answer because he will just kill them all day. Now, unfortunately for Essendon, I think they could be on the end of an absolute drubbing here. Their defense is incredibly thin with all the injuries that they have, and with Cameron, Brian Myers, Tyson Stengel, and I mean, you could list off a couple more forwards that Geelong have had over the last couple of weeks are in absolutely ripping form. So I think this game has all the hallmarks of a Geelong absolute drubbing, maybe even a 10-goal win for the Cats. They have a very good record against Essendon as well. Now, my brother's also picked the Cats. He said they won the last 7 games against Essendon. Don't see that changing this week without big bodies, which has been a bit of a problem for Geelong in more recent times, so they'll have no problems there. The Cats should be able to kick a winning score against the Bombers' defence, which I tend to agree with. I think Charlie Curnow really should have banked in against the Essendon defence last week. I don't think the Geelong defence will let that slide. I think they'll definitely dominate this game. And then the final game I want to take a little bit more of a deep diver into is the Port Adelaide v Melbourne game. So Melbourne been really disappointing in their game against St Kilda a few weeks ago, but they are finding new ways to score in more recent times. Basically, since their shocking start of the season where they had 5 straight losses, they have been scoring for fun. I think the Power simply have to tag Kozi Pickett. He was shut down against St Kilda by Windhager a few weeks ago, and it went a long way into St Kilda winning that game. So I think that Bergman probably gets that matchup. We've seen him playing a tagging role over the past month or so for the Power. I think he gets that role today. I think he's really good in the matchup if he runs through the middle of the ground, Pickett, and I think that he'll be able to stop him up forward. I also am really interested to see what Port Adelaide do with Max Gawn. In more recent encounters between the two sides, the Power have really gone after Max Gawn physically to try and put him off his game. So I will be interested to see if Port Adelaide keep going with Visentini, the younger ruck, or if they'll go with a more big-body ruckman like Jordan Sweet. I think they may make a change there, even though Port Adelaide won last week. But overall, despite Port Adelaide winning against the Giants the week before, that was more of a response game, if I'm being honest. We have seen this narrative play out before for the Power. Ken Hinkley gets them up for a game after getting dragged through the media throughout the week. They record a shock win. They had that performance against the Giants. They were so tough over the footy, but I really can't see them doing it 2 weeks in a row. So I'm going to be picking Melbourne in this one. I think they'll be too strong through the middle of the ground, and I think they look more likely to score goals. At the moment, Port Adelaide really are relying on Georgiades to kick them a winning score. So I really think Melbourne can, shut him down, and then they should be okay to defend nicely and then kick a winning score. So my brother has also picked the Demons. He has said that Melbourne have won 3 of their past 4 games at Adelaide Oval. Port need to win in the midfield battle if they are any chance, but I also trust Melbourne's defence over Port Adelaide's forward line. So with that being said, guys, let's get to our full tip for round 14. So my full tips are the Dogs to win against the Saints, the Hawks to beat the Crows, the Lions to beat the Giants, Cats to beat Essendon, Fremantle to beat North Melbourne, Melbourne to beat Port Adelaide, and Carlton to beat the West Coast Eagles. And my brother's tips for round 14 are the Dogs to beat St Kilda, the Crows to beat Hawthorn, Brisbane to beat the Giants, Geelong to beat Essendon, Fremantle to beat North Melbourne, Melbourne to beat the Power, and Carlton to beat the West Coast Eagles. Now, that being said, let's get to our certainty picks for this week. So my certainty pick for the week is the Dogs to beat St Kilda. Of course, the Bulldogs losing to the Hawks last week. And my brother's certainty tip is the Lions to beat the Giants. Of course, the Lions losing to the Crows last week. But guys, just before we end today's episode of the preview to the new round, let's just take a quick look at the tipping combo force for the channel. It is a little bit outdated. We'll see one more game today. I'm recording this just before the Melbourne v Collingwood game. But at this stage, I have dropped to 19th position. I've had a shocking week over the previous week. I've only got 3 tips, and I've dropped right off the pace. I am currently 15 tips off of top spot with Leviticus. He is dominating right now. 6 tips in front of the boy from SNB, and then 9 tips in front of Ethan Sports. No one's used their Joker over the past few weeks. I'd be a little bit surprised if anyone uses it at this stage because of all the bye rounds. That's when I'm kind of waiting to use my Joker, yet to use it yet. My brother is 1 spot behind me, but he's already used his Joker. He's on equal points with me, so I've got him pretty well covered. But I'm going to have a really good Joker week to potentially steal a top spot from here. It's going to have to be a massive performance from me. I'm going to have to get almost full tips and get an 18 week just to have a chance. But guys, that's pretty much all we have for the preview to round 14. If you did enjoy it, of course, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Really appreciating the support over the channel this week. And just wanted to quickly mention as well, the reason why there was no video essay out on the Monday was because the review came out on Monday, of course, with the late game over the week. So the video essay has been pushed back to Monday next week. So I hope you were excited for that. I'll leave maybe the thumbnail as a little preview for you guys to maybe figure out what the video will be about. So guys, let's get to my brother's betting segment, of course. Now, he hasn't actually been able to record a clip this week, so I'm actually going to be reading out the bets for you guys. So just because my face is on this doesn't mean I've made these bets. So definitely make sure to check the link down below and, message my brother and tell him how wrong he is. Don't just leave a comment down below here because it's not my bet. But anyway, let's get into my brother's betting segment for the week. So first of all, we have our same game multi on Thursday night between the Saints and the Bulldogs. My brother has gone with Wangeneen-Milera to get 25 or more touches. He's gone with Bontempelli to get 20 plus touches. Bailey Dale to get 25. Mitch Owens to get an anytime goal scorer along with Jack Higgins. Now his certainty bet is Brian Myers to get 20 or more disposals as well in their clash against the Bombers. And finally, the outside of the boundary bet is Nick Larkey to kick 3 or more goals against the Dockers. So that is at 360 as well. Of course, guys, if you are going to gamble, of course, do it responsibly. But that is my brother's betting segment for the week. And with that being said, guys, let's get to our AFL Fantasy segment. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to record this week a video for it, but I will do a quick little review of it now. So with that being said, over the week, I had a pretty decent round 13. I got 1,856, which was ranked 12,086. So not the greatest, but I mean, I'm going to take it. Now, looking at a couple of good scorers, Fonty loved that with 74 as a rookie. Sheasel really saved his score in the final term to get 119 as my captain, so 238. Connor Rosie did really well, 121. Trainer loved him with the 84. Dawson, 109. Chera, 107 in his first game for the team. Clayton Oliver, 109. Will Ashcroft, 113. Max Gawn, of course, did really well. Caleb Daniel returned to a bit of form with the 97 as well. But we also, of course, have to mention Max Holmes. My namesake, my last name is actually Holmes, by the way. So Max Holmes, that brilliant performance with Bailey Smith going out. Really love that from him. Thank God for Max Holmes. 146 in the end after a 40 disposal performance. Really, really well done. Now, I've got to mention a couple of lower lights, unfortunately. Jake Bowie really dropped off. Basically, since Judd McVie returned, he only got 78, so I was hoping a little bit more there. Zach Merritt and Nick Daicos, sub 100 scores. I really was looking for more. Levi Ashcroft, 63. Going to have to start looking to get rid of him in the next few weeks. And both the Crows forwards for mine in Isaac Rankin and James Peatling. Now, Peatling, of course, is going to be suspended for a week. But Isaac Rankin's been moved forward over the past 5 or 6 weeks, which I really haven't liked on a fantasy point of view. I'm sure there's Crows fans out there who are loving it because he's scoring goals. But no, this is all about fantasy here. And I'm really pissed off that he's playing forward. But anyway, there's not much I can really do about it. So this is my brother's team over the weekend, of course. He had a couple of good scorers looking at different players, though. Lockie Ash with the 105, Rory Laird with the 95. He did bring in Tom Stewart, 110 on his return to the team, so really good job from him. Looking at a couple of others, Not really great from anyone else other than maybe Tristan Cherry with the 111 on as a captain, and Brian Myers, of course, actually really well done from that with the 108. But a couple of lesser lights on his point of view. You're looking at probably Tom Liberatore, not really that good with the 63. Christian Petrarca, 89, probably would have expected more. And Toby Green, of course, coming out with a bad corky. I think he would be okay this week, but not great signs there for the Giants captain. But with that being said, guys, let's get to our trades for the week. So my trades for this week are Fonzie out for Hugh Jackson, Archer Reed out for Nick Madden, and Luke Traynor out for Tom Stewart. So 2 players on my bench that I've got rid of this week for a lot of cash regeneration. Got Jackson because he did play a full game for the Power on the weekend and had a pretty decent performance. I think he was about 40 at halftime. Did come off a little bit in the second half, but as a kid, you're not really expecting much more. Madden had a really good debut for the Giants. Scored 81 against Vizentini. So it's going to be a little bit tougher for him against more experienced ruckman. But I think he showed some decent signs there for the Giants. And Tom Stewart, I'm on that train. I think that every single year, he always has a very poor start to the year. He either I think it was last year, he got tagged most of the first half of the season, but then he just comes good in the last half of the year. So I think I'm on that train now. My brother's convinced me. So I'm going to be picking up Tom Stewart this week, and then hopefully that's going to propel my team even further forward. Now, my brother's trades at this moment are Caden Cleary out for Neil Erasmus, Xavier Lindsay out for Hugh Jackson, and then he's got rid of Levi Ashcroft for Adam Chera. So at this point, I think we're both just trying to copy each other's teams to see who can score more points at this moment in time. I don't know. Caden Cleary, I mean, I'm not surprised he's out, obviously, with the bye now. Neil Erasmus was a bit of a surprising one. He said he may change this trade. However, he's been in pretty decent form at the moment, so I'll take his word for it. I haven't really kept the eye on Neil Erasmus, but I'll take his word for it anyway. Xavier Lindsay out, not too surprised. I think everyone's going to start getting rid of him in the next few weeks or so for Hugh Jackson, like I mentioned. And then Levi Ashcroft, I tried to move him this week, but I just couldn't do so. So he's gone with Adam Chera. Carlton have a very good couple of weeks coming up. My one trade that I kind of teased last week, I was hoping to be able to do it. I don't think I'll be able to. I may be able to do it next week. I guess I can mention it now. I wanted to get in Charlie Curnow. He's at a price around $7.80, and with the fact that they've got North Melbourne, West Coast, and Port Adelaide in the next 3 weeks, I think you can absolutely bank in on goals. He scored 80 against Essendon over the week with only 2 goals. So I think in the next 3 weeks, he's going to go absolutely crazy. So I guess if you guys are looking for a trade option, I wouldn't be surprised if Charlie Curnow goes crazy in the next 3 weeks. I couldn't get that trade done, unfortunately, but if you guys can, make sure to try and do that sort of trade. But finally, let's get to our AFL Fantasy League for the week. So I moved up in the ranks. I moved up from, I think it was 44th to 40, and I have jumped in front of my brother for the first time since, I think, probably all the way through the season. I'm currently in front of him by, I think that's, oh, geez, I jumped up by a lot. I'm 50 points in front of him at the moment, so suck shit. Absolutely dominated him. He's going to be crying about that. He's currently in 42nd spot, so he's nearly outside the top half, which isn't great, but anyway. Looking at the top of the ladder, though, the Cheetah Cub still holds top spot. He currently holds the lead by over 150 points. He's had a very good couple of weeks, this guy. The Welshman is Bailey Welsh in second spot. We have Delusional Fools in third. Len Never Pretends, that's Lenny, in fourth. Unfortunately, my boy, Pub Feed with Sauce, has dropped all the way down to 7th after a tough week, unfortunately for him. So he was right up the top. Number 1 AFL fantasy person after round 1. Unfortunately, since then, he's dropped away a little bit. I'm still banking on my boy jumping back up into the top 5 very shortly. And my favourite name in the top 10 at the moment, Bosch69, Tim Plunkett, is in 5th spot. So I like that guy as well. But guys, with that being said, let's move on from the AFL fantasy segment and get to our final segment of the episode. So, of course, the last segment is the flog of the week. Now, like I said a little bit earlier in the episode, there have been a lot of candidates this week to get this award or this nomination, but we've gone with Caroline Wilson. So, on Monday night on the Agenda Centres, she brought up a new trade rumour or some news regarding Nasiah Wangeneen-Milera's trade or potential trade out of St Kilda. She originally came out by saying that Nasiah Wangeneen-Milera She came out first saying that Nasiah Wangeneen-Milera has indicated he won't be playing for the Crows due to Texas racism ban back in 2021. Of course, if you don't remember, he made a racist remark to a North Adelaide player at the time when he was at a game. I think it was a reserves game against the Crows reserves. Robbie Young, he made a racial remark. I can't remember what it was, but he said something and then he was banned and fined as well. Now, Caroline Wilson went on to say that the view from Port Adelaide and others is that if he does leave, he'll be going to Port Adelaide or staying at the Saints. Basically, the only two options at this moment. Now, this was quickly responded to by the player manager of Nasiah Wangeneen-Milera coming out in Corey Norris. He said, reports are being made in the media suggesting that Wangeneen-Milera has ruled out joining the Adelaide Crows due to comments made by Taylor Walker in 2021. He said these are false. Now, he also went on to say that Nasiah is currently considering his future, and at this stage, no decisions have been made, and any speculation suggesting otherwise is inaccurate. So, in fact, sorry, this was from Ben Williams, which is his player manager. Sorry, the tweet was from Corey Norris. Now, from my understanding, it's a bit of a he said, she said, basically. It's going to be, I don't think this will ever get a true answer unless either Caroline Wilson comes out and says, like, apologizes for the reporting and says that it was false, that she got false information, or that Wangeneen-Milera maybe makes some sort of comment in the future. So I don't know if we'll ever get the truth about it. However, the fact that the player manager came out so quickly in response to say this is false makes me lean towards this being false, or at least being a little bit exaggerated. And we also saw Taylor Walker come out this morning on Triple M in Adelaide, basically saying that it was false reports whatsoever. He has a working relationship with the player manager, Ben Williams. He immediately got in contact with him after the reports came out, and he said that they were false. So, even though I'm not really a huge journalism fan, I think you've known that from a couple of videos that I've done and listening to this podcast, you probably know that. But overall, I think this is either been completely false and she's been told a lie, she's completely made up the lie, or that we will just never know. I just think that this has been way overblown. We've seen that this show, The Agenda Setters on Channel 7, has been notorious for making clickbait comments over the past, year already. We've seen this show. We already talked about it earlier in the episode. But this just continues to be like, throw mud at the wall and eventually something will come back. And for a long time, this show seems like they haven't got a lot of backlash. They're just like occasional comments, but who gives a fuck, right? But I mean, when it comes from a player manager saying, no, this is not true, it just seems a little bit like she was telling a lie or a bit of a fib or whatever. And I think the language that they use in these sort of topics from like the likes of Caroline Wilson, Sam McClure, Tom Morris, all this sort of stuff, when they make these sort of trade rumors, the language that they use is very careful and calculated because they don't want to be sued. And because Caroline Wilson would use the words like, it's my understanding, or it's my belief, or I've been told, it's like, no, I mean, at least put your nuts on the line and admit that this is what you believe as well. Like, all right, so my reporting is the fact that this has happened, okay? And if I'm wrong, well, no, you don't say if you're wrong, because you're supposed to be the journalist in this space. You're supposed to be right. I mean, I think that anyway. And if you are wrong, well, look, everyone can be wrong occasionally, but you are supposed to be, you're paid to do this job. And the fact that they sit there and just mudsling all the time, and then when they do get called out, well, what? I mean, they take a couple of days off. Oh, I'm so sorry, you get to take some annual leave. I'm like, fuck me, this just shits me sometimes because, look, it may well be true, but at least have some sort of backing behind it. The fact that this was so quickly, contested against you, not from the show, by the way. The show, these sort of shows, these media pundits and media personalities like the Kane Cornses and the Nick Rewalts and the Matthew Lloyds of the world, when they have these journalists making these comments, they don't fight back, or not even bite back at it, but just like question it. Like, so you've really heard that the reason why Naz doesn't want to leave, doesn't want to go to the or the Crows, or he's ruled out the Crows is because of a racism saga. I mean, I'm not asking you to name sources because I understand that they've got to be secret, but you've got to at least give some fight back a little bit. Like, And I do like the argument of like saying, well, when I was a child and I had to do essays at school, I had to give my references. Why don't these journalists have to? But I do understand that they can't sometimes because some of the references they do have are supposed to be secret and they probably get paid for it, I would say. But I just think that sometimes these stories that come out, especially on this show, this Agenda Setters show that's come this year, they are so wildly overblown and I'm getting a bit sick of it. Because we saw, what was it, last week with Tom Morris? I mean, obviously it was on a different show, but we saw him talking about Ken Hinckley, and Ken Hinckley immediately just turned around and said, oh, there you go, it's just Tom Morris, he's a fucking idiot. And I just thought, I like it, the fact that the players and the teams and the support and the coaches and that are fighting back against the clickbaity journalism of the sport, because it's starting to be getting a bit out of control now, and I think it needs to be fought back a little bit on, especially by the players, by the support, by the clubs themselves. I don't have an issue necessarily of, North Melbourne, for example, or the Western Bulldogs banning Kane Corns from the rooms. I don't think that's a big deal. I think if he's going to be continually hounding a certain player or a certain club, I think they have every right to say, no, we don't want you in the rooms. This is where we relax. This is where we, get ready for games. We celebrate winning. We celebrate our wins, or we lick our wounds for our losses. I don't think we necessarily need to have Kane Corns running around the fucking rooms looking around at like eyeballing Harry Sheezel or whatever and having a fucking go at him. So, yeah, overall, I mean, I guess this has just been an episode of me ranting about the media, I guess, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. This may be a little bit more of a shorter episode this week, guys, because my brother isn't here. So maybe just over 40 minutes or so. But that's basically all I've got for this episode, guys. If you did enjoy it, of course, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're growing quite a bit on this more BR channel. So we've been putting out these podcast clips and they've been going pretty well. So if you haven't been enjoying them or you think your mates would enjoy it, make sure to send it to them or make sure to leave a like, comment down below, of course. If you are watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on Spotify as well, make sure to leave us 5 stars and make sure to follow as well, so you're notified on the podcast and the review that we release over there every single week. But again, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you all next week.